Hi guys, my name is VG. I'm from Kill Jaden. I'm going to be doing a series of how-to videos for Warlocks. How to destruction in World PvP. I'm going to be covering everything from stats, reforge, gemming, to little tips and tricks for macros to make your World PvP a better experience. I hope you enjoy the videos. And welcome to part 1 of my video, movement and keybinds. We'll be starting from the ground up as I help people to understand how to play a move more efficiently. First off, we'll start with what our default keybinds are. Left and right are A and D. They're not necessary. Instead, change them to strafing, left and right. While your backwards button can be changed to something more useful entirely. If you need to back up, move sideways in the direction that you wish to go, and you can kite mobs and people just like that while still firing spells at them. Alright, so now that we have our movement out of the way, let's have a look at our keybinds. A lot of you have your own keybinds and use them quite well, but I'm giving new players an idea of how to get better. And easy access to your arsenal of spells and abilities is the most surefire way to get ahead of the pack. So here I'll show you my keybinds and just how easy it is to do everything you need with minimal or zero clicking. I don't use anything from 6 or above because I don't like moving my hands away from my resting point, so I have E, Q, X, Z, H, tilde, T. Now when I run out of keys here, I like to use my Alt button, and you can have Alt Q, Alt E, etc. So for my portal, I have Alt Q. To activate it, I have Alt E. And when I want to banish something, I have Alt C. My shield is Alt F. My dark regeneration macro is Alt 1, and I have my shield as Alt S. So when I want to use my Shadow Fury, I use my mouse button, and I use a Naga personally, so for the number 4 I have that. So that way when I'm moving my mouse, I can instantly click the button, and wherever my pointer is, that's where it's going down. So it's really quick and really efficient. So next we'll move on to macros. Now we're going to have a look at some macros. Macros are simple little scripts in the game that let us do something faster and often more efficiently than what we could have done normally. So let's start off by typing /macro. This brings up a window that has our general macros and our character specific macros. So let's open up a character specific macro. These are some examples of macros that I've already prepared and use constantly in PvP and just doing whatever I need to do. So this is a dark regeneration macro. This one has on the first line cast dark regeneration / use healthstone. Now this is incredibly useful for PvP because what it'll do with one action is enable dark regeneration and eat a healthstone at the same time, and it won't cost you 2 GCDs. So now we go to our next macro here, which is a mouse over macro. Mouse over macros can be applied to any spell that targets an opponent or any other person, really. What it does is you can put your cursor over a target and hit the button, and without targeting him, the spell will be cast on that person or creature or whatever. Now, I personally have this for 3 different spells. I have it for my Fear, my Curse of the Elements, and my Curse of Enfeeblement. That's pretty much all I use it for, but you can think of any number of ways to do it. My next macro here is Bane of Havoc. My Bane of Havoc is it casts Havoc on a target, and then immediately it targets my last target. So how I use this in PvP is I'll target somebody's mob that is fairly low life, you know, about 40%, and then I will target them, and then I will hit 1 in my case, because that's my hotkey. It'll cast Bane of Havoc on that target, and then it'll immediately target the mob that's low health, which I can follow up then by using Shadow Burn. I'll show the videos to give you examples later on. Now let's try making a macro for ourselves. So let's hit the new button, find ourselves an icon. In this case we'll just use one of the Power Rangers mounts. We'll enter a name, new macro, and we'll hit OK. So now we have a new macro commands area here. So what you want to do is open up your spellbook, and from here you can enter pretty much anything that you want to use in combination. So a really easy one for people to learn is cast. So /cast, then you put your mouse over the icon of the spell that you wish to cast, and you shift click it. So for instance, I'll use Chaos Bolt. /cast Chaos Bolt. Now, obviously you don't need this macro, but if you put it in conjunction with another one, for instance, not cast, but /use 14, 14 happens to be the slot where my activated trinket is. And 14 is just the slot number. So you can have it in 13 or 14. And you can even activate gloves for engineers, those of us who are engineers out there. And you can also do it for your cloak, etc. So you can also have it to /cast and use your Dark Soul. So that way it'll activate your Dark Souls, it'll use your trinket, and you'll start casting a Chaos Bolt all at the same time. They're incredibly useful, and I hope you guys learn how to use them. Now we're going to look at the Warlocks spellbook and find out what fun and amazing abilities we have to make everybody else's day miserable. We're going to start off with Banish. Banishes an enemy demon, aberration, or elemental for up to 30 seconds. Pretty standard, about 8 seconds in PvP. You can target them again and cast it, and it will break the banish. Blood Fear, possibly one of the best and most broken things that they've given Warlocks in a very long time. Instant CC. So, what this does is it replaces your castable Fear, fears the enemy up to a 30-yard range, has a 10-second cooldown, but costs 10% of her life, which is pretty much nothing. Fantastic. Next, Chaos Bolt. Chaos Bolt for a long time didn't hit hard. There wasn't enough of an impact to actually make it feel satisfying. That all changed with Mists of Pandaria. It always crits. In addition, it increases its damage for your critical strike chance, which works in correlation with our Dark Soul instability. Very fun. I recommend using it a lot. Command Demon. This is a little more complicated. So we have 5 pets to choose from. We have 5 different abilities when they're out. We also have different abilities when we sacrifice them, and I'll go over them. For the Imp, when you have it out, it cauterizes its master. It deals a small amount of damage to you, and it heals you for 12% of your total health over a period of time. When you sacrifice it, you get Singe Magic. Singe Magic can be cast on an ally, and it will remove 1 debuff, and that's it. Somewhat useful in PvP. I wouldn't recommend it though. Voidwalker. The Voidwalker has a disarm. The disarm is fantastic, especially in arena or just when you're out and about. You can use it to disarm warriors for 8 seconds, and most of them get confused because they don't understand that Warlocks have this skill. Very good. So now when you sacrifice your demon, you get Bulwark. This Shadow Bulwark is amazing. By far my favorite skill so far. Temporarily grants the Voidwalker 30% of its maximum health. Well, in this instance, it's referring to you instead. So you get Last Stand, Warrior's Last Stand. It is amazing. If I press this button, my health goes up to 677,000. That's without the health buff. So you do the math. You can have a lot of fun with this, especially when you heal for a percentage of your HP with regeneration. Now we have Conflagrate. Conflagrate is amazing. It is so good now, and I love it. What it does is when you actually hit Conflagrate, you get 3 stacks of Backlash. Backlash reduces the casting time of 1 Chaos Bolt or 3 Incinerates by a decent amount. I believe it's 30%. So it also slows for 50% on a target that's immolated. If the target is not immolated and you do not have the glyph, it will not slow. However, if you have it glyphed, which you should if you're PvPing, it'll slow for 50%. For those of you that don't know, there's Hellstone, and the glyph of Hellstone is what you want to be using if you're out and about. It restores 40% of your maximum health over 10 seconds, so no instant heal, but when you're using it with Dark Regeneration, it is amazing, especially when you have Shadow Bulwark going as well. Next, Create Soulwell. What it does is just creates Hellstones for the entire raid that you can click. Now, Curse of Enfeeblement. If you're against a rogue or a warrior, you want to be using this. Binds the target in demonic energy, reducing their physical damage by 20% and increasing the casting time of their spells by 25% on players. It is amazing. You want to use this against them. Curse of the Elements. Increases magic damage taken by 5%. Now, this is good. For most of my videos, this is what I use because I don't need to use Curse of the Elements, or Enfeeblement rather, to destroy people. Dark Intent, pretty standard. It's our buff that we give to the raid. It's 10% spell power on everybody. Dark Regeneration. This is another talented ability. This restores 30% of your health over time and increases the healing you receive by 25%. So because the health stone is a hot, it will also increase its total healing to you. It is very good. Also, it counts for eating your embers. Dark Soul Instability. It's our only damage cooldown. It increases our critical chance by 30% for 20 seconds. Very good. So we'll move on to our Demonic Circle. This summons a portal location at your feet, and if you move away from it, you can then use Demonic Circle Teleport to teleport to that location, whether it be on a ledge or anything. You can have it underground, anywhere, as long as you are in range. Demonic Portal, or Gateway rather, you can set up to any other point within 70 yards, and you can jump from one point to another. Now when you set it up, it has some setup time, and it takes 15 seconds for it to actually start generating a charge once it's fully summoned. Really good in PvP. In World PvP, if you can set it up to have an escape route in combination with your Demonic Circle, it can be amazing for getting away from people, especially if you're trying to camp an area. Now we have Drain Life. Drain Life used to be a little better, but I like it where it is right now. It's 7.5k per second damage, so pretty much negligible. However, it restores 2% of the caster's health every second as well. So if you think that it does nothing, then you should do Shadow Bulwark and Life Drain at the same time if you're in a sticky situation. However, most of the time you should be able to actually kill them and eat embers occasionally. Drain Life is pretty much for the other specs. Still really useful. Ember Tap. Ember Tap is one of the best things that Warlocks have gotten in a very long time. Destruction self-healing is fantastic. Arguably the best in the game right now, because it's health on demand. If you have 4 embers, you can heal yourself for 80% of your total health. And for me, that's almost 500,000. It is amazing. But don't burn all of your embers, because if you do, you're not going to be able to shadow burn. You want to be able to shadow burn something even if you're at around 10% health. If you shadow burn and get those extra embers, you can eat 1 ember right away and still shadow burn. Enslave Demon is more of a PvE skill. You enslave 1 target demon, forcing it to do your stuff for about 5 minutes. It gets a little weaker. It's not really that amazing. Now we have the Eye of Kilrog. The Eye of Kilrog is just literally a floating eye. You can glyph it to fly around and look at stuff. Not really useful. So, Fel Flame. Fel Flame is fantastic. It hits a lot harder now, and you can spam it, and it is probably the best filler you want. If a warrior is riding you, you don't want to be casting Incinerate, you don't want to get locked out, but you can spam Fel Flame, and it hits hard, and it is really good. Fire and Brimstone. Now, Fire and Brimstone is probably one of the most interesting things we've gotten. Your next Immolate, Incinerate, or Conflag will hit all targets within 15 yards. So, the slow on our Conflag can hit everything in a 15-yard AoE. However, that slow is, when augmented, is only 30%. However, when you do it with Immolate and set everything around you on fire, those ticks generate embers. So, it is still worth using. Now this skill, the Flames of Zoroth. This revives your last pet that you've had. So in my case, it'd be my Voidwalker. So if I want my Voidwalker back instantly to use his disarm again, I use that in correlation with Sacrifice, because I can sacrifice him right after his disarm's gone, and then still have access to my Bulwark. Grimoire of Sacrifice. You sacrifice your demon to gain one of its abilities, increasing the power of your single target spells by 25%, increasing your maximum health by 20%, and regenerating 2% of your maximum health every 5 seconds. This is by far the best ability that you can get out of that tier of talents, despite what anybody else says. It is probably about 90% use rate from all Warlock players. They're nerfing it in 5.2, but I still believe it's going to be the best, just because of the convenience of having all of your power in yourself, as opposed to the poorly scripted AI of our pets. Havoc. Now, Havoc will live up to its name. It'll cause havoc. Causes the next Chaos Bolt or 3 single target spells by the Warlock to also strike this target. So what that means is you can actually bane a target and then kill somebody else pretty much at the same time. So if you have somebody, a player, who's at under 20% and you bane another target, you can turn around and shadow burn that player and it will also hit the other person, even though they are not at under 20%. And using an execute on a player that's above 20%, it hurts a lot. There's a reason they're supposed to be executes. You will definitely have a lot of fun with it, and I'll show you some examples later in the video. Immolate. Burns the enemy for 9.5k fire damage and then another 48 after. It's just a simple, small initial damage and then dot, and it generates burning embers for us on critical strikes. Very simple. Next we have Incinerate. Deals 45,000 damage to an enemy for me, and it generates embers, critical strikes, double this effect. This is your bread and butter damage spell. You want to be spamming it after Conflag 3 times and rinsing and repeating. Kil'jaeden's Cunning. This is a talented ability and you can cast while moving indefinitely. This is by far the best of the 3 that you can do if you're trying to do PvP. Rain of Fire. Rain of Fire is just our AoE, and literally it is raining fire. It deals 50% additional damage if the targets are immolated, which is pretty handy when you use Fire and Brimstone to augment your immolate. And it no longer stuns anymore as of a patch ago, but it is still really good. Ritual of Summoning, probably the most traditional thing that anybody thinks of when thinking of a Warlock, all the way back to vanilla. You had a Warlock, you could summon people. Very useful. Shadowburn. Shadowburn is the hardest hitting execute in the game right now. I have hit people for over 400,000 with it easily without cooldowns, and it is usable on players under 20% health, and it returns 15% of your total mana after 5 seconds if the target dies within 5 seconds. And if it yields experience or honor, the caster gains burning embers instead. So when you kill a target with it, you use 1, you gain 2 embers. Your net gain is 1. It is amazing when you combine it with Havoc. Shadow Fury. Shadow Fury no longer deals damage, however it stuns all enemies within 8 yards, like this right here, for 3 seconds. It is arguably the better one, especially if you're versing warriors in arena or something like that, where Howl of Terror just doesn't cut it. Next we have a talented ability, Soul Link. Soul Link is in here purely because when Soul Link is used with Grimoire of Sacrifice, it gives you 20% additional health. So because of that 20% additional health, I'm sitting at almost 500,000 unbuffed. That's why you use it. Soul Shatter, PvE ability, reduces threat by 90% to all enemies within 50 yards. Soulstone. Soulstone cast on a party member or yourself will let you resurrect upon death, and you resurrect with 6% health, 20% mana. Straightforward. These are your demons, your imp. Typically, traditionally, it has been your long range staple as a destruction warlock. It used to be really good, got nerfed, and now it's pretty much useless. Voidwalker is your solo tanking one. Fellhunter used to be your arena one because it could lock up spellcasters and whatnot. And if for those of you who played in BC, the Succubus was your destruction's best friend back in BC, if you actually played back then. Next we have the Doomguard. The Doomguard is pretty much useless. You do not really use it anymore. It has about 160,000 health. It hasn't been updated for Mists of Pandaria, so people can two-shot it very easily. The damage is negligible. Don't use it in PvP. The Infernal. In World PvP, the Infernal can be very useful, however. Big AoE stun for 2 seconds and deals AoE damage. It is really useful as a second Shadow Fury, but that's about it. Its damage is nothing. Twilight Ward. When you have Twilight Ward and you have your 4-set bonus of your PvP set, it absorbs magic damage instead of just Holy and Shadow. It absorbs almost 70,000 magic damage, so it's almost like an ice barrier. It is really good. Unending Breath. You don't have to breathe for 10 minutes. It's fun if you're farming things or just kind of exploring. The Unending Resolve. Finally, an ability that we really needed. The Warlock hardens his skin, reducing all damage by 40%, preventing our spells from being silenced or interrupted for 8 seconds. Truly amazing. However, you can still be disoriented, you can still be stunned. So don't think you can cast during anything. Next we have some passives that I'll just quickly go over to give you an idea. So, Aftermath. In Destruction, you can cast Rain of Fire and it does not need to be channeled, and you can have multiple Rain of Fires stacking at a single point to deal more damage. Backdraft. After you cast Conflag, your next Chaos Bolt or 3 Incinerates are 30% faster. Backlash. Gives you 25% chance when hit by a physical attack to make your next Incinerate instant cast. This is really good against rogues, really good against warriors, and red. Anything that's touching you, even if other mobs are on you, you get instant casts all the time. Your embers, that's your resource. So you can have a maximum of 3 embers, 4 embers with the glyph, and next patch it's going to be 4 embers all the time. So one of the things that people seem to misunderstand about Destruction Warlocks is their mana base. People are always wondering why the heck it goes from full to nothing and back up again so quickly. You drain energy directly from the Twisting Nether. Your mana restores 625% faster, and your spell haste increases your mana regeneration. Typically, you run out of mana in PvP occasionally when you're spamming Fell Flame or whatnot, but it regens really quickly, really fast. Our mana as Destruction is essentially energy. Control Demon is just, control over your demon. Fell Armor. Back in the day, Fell Armor used to actually be a buff, but however they just increased it, or not increased it, but rather they turned it into a passive, and it increases your armor and your total health and the amount of health generated through spells and effects. The rest of these are just your pet's abilities for the most part. Ember Storm, your mastery increases the damage from your Immolate, Incinerate, Fell Flame, and Conflagrate. No Chaos Bolt, unfortunately. Now we have Pandemic. When refreshing your periodic damage effects, the duration remaining on the previous effect is added to the new one, up to a maximum of 50% of the base duration. So what this is saying is if I have Immolate on somebody for half of its duration, for this instance 7 seconds, and I refresh it, it'll be on there for 21 seconds. Pretty useful. Pyroclasm. Chaos Bolt is affected by Backdraft, but consumes 3 charges. Just a way that they programmed the game. Soul Harvest. This is probably one of the funnest things when you have Grimoire of Sacrifice. You and your demon absorb nearby wandering souls, regenerating 2% health every second while out of combat. This is awesome. If you're out of combat for very long with your Grimoire of Sacrifice up, you regenerate 4% of your total health roughly every, I'd say about 4 seconds or so. It is awesome. And that's about it for the spells. Next we'll go to talents. Now onto the Warlock's talent tree. At the first tier we have Dark Regeneration, Soul Leech, and Harvest Life. All of them can be fun in certain situations. Dark Regeneration is your PvP spec. Hands down the best for it. I already explained it in the skills, so I'll move over to the Soul Leech. Your passive is your Incinerate, Fell Flame, Chaos Bolts heal you and your pet for 10% of the damage dealt. This is pretty useful in PvP and raiding because you heal yourself for a considerable amount, especially on some boss fights where the boss takes a damage debuff and you deal absurd amounts of damage. Harvest Life. This works like Drain Life, except it hits every target in the area, draining a certain amount of health. If you're trying to do AoE polling and whatnot, take this. It is amazing for it. In PvP, not so much. Second tier talents. Howl of Terror. The Howl of Terror is an AoE fear for all of the enemies around you, up to 5, to fear, or get feared. When hit by a damaging attack, the cooldown on Howl of Terror was reduced by 1 second. Now I'm not sure if there's an internal cooldown on it, but I believe the internal cooldown on it is somewhere around half a second to 1 second. Because I know when I'm getting hit by multiple mobs, it's not going down incredibly fast. Mortal Coil. Mortal Coil is yet another spell that used to be just given to us, but is now a tier in the talent tree because I believe that the developers couldn't think of anything else to put in here. So, hits a target, restores 15% of your maximum life, and causes them to run around in horror for 3 seconds. Horror is different than fear. They cannot berserker rage out of it or anything that removes fear effects. Not like Will of the Forsaken or anything like that. Shadow Fury, as I explained, AoE stun. Very good. Soul Link. Soul Link reduces the damage by half between you and your pet, but also halves your demon's health. It is not amazing because it takes 50% of your healing and gives it to your pet as well. However, if you take it as the passive, then it is wonderful because it gives you 20% extra total health. Sacrificial Pact. Sacrificial Pact is an interesting ability, however I have not had much luck with it as I don't like to play with a pet at the moment because Grimoire of Sacrifice just offers you so much more damage. What it does is your demon sacrifices half of its current health to shield its master for 200% of the sacrificed health. So, if you have that, you can also cast it, well, if you have no demon, your health is sacrificed instead, but it can be cast while under impairing effects. So you can be stunned and you can still pop the bubble, but you sacrifice health to do so. It cannot be dispelled, it cannot be spell stolen. It is okay, but I would recommend not using it. Dark Bargain. So a lot of Warlocks and I differ on this. They like Dark Bargain. I used to love it. Prevents all damage for 8 seconds. When the shield fades, you take 50% of it as damage dealt over 8 seconds. So it's a dot. You can also use your your Twilight Ward here to absorb some of the damage. Typically, I like it, but I don't like taking the damage afterwards. I love having the higher health, and when I pop my Bulwark and my healing, typically I'll kill anything anyway, and it heals me back to full from nothing, which is why Dark Bargain I find is not quite as good. Moving on to the next tier, Blood Fear. An absolute must. Blood Fear is by far the best thing in this tree because you cannot get better. Burning Rush drains 4% of your maximum health per second to increase your movement speed by 50%. Doesn't matter. Drains too much health, you get snared all the time, you get stunned all the time, you get slowed, like, it doesn't matter. You can get rooted. There's no way that Burning Rush is ever going to be useful unless it makes you ignore roots and slows. Unbound Will. Unbound Will is another trinket for all intents and purposes. It purges all magic effects, movement impairing, and all effects that make you lose control of your character for 20% of your maximum health. It's still good, and likely it's going to be taken over Blood Fear once a new patch hits. However, it does cost 20% of your maximum health. However, it's on a 1-minute cooldown, which is very desirable. On the next tier of talents, we have Grimoire of Supremacy. It summons stronger demons than what we have. They're not that amazing. It says 20% additional damage, but I have my doubts. I've never been hit by any of these creatures hard at all. Now, the Grimoire of Service. If you're playing a Demonology Warlock and you are using Grimoire of Supremacy, you might want to try the Grimoire of Service. It allows you to summon a second demon who fights for you for 20 seconds, and it can be pretty useful, especially if you have a Fel Guard and a Fel Hunter working in combination. It can be awesome. However, I still would not use it. The Grimoire of Sacrifice is simply too good. The 25% extra damage on single target, increasing your maximum health because of Soul Link, and regenerating 2% of your maximum health every 5 seconds, even in combat, is just too good to pass up. Now for the last tier, we have Archimonde's Vengeance here. Passive, 5% of all damage dealt to you is dealt back to the enemy. Not bad. It's not good, though. By no means. Now, causes the enemy to suffer 25% of all damage you take. Typically, if you're kiting and playing a decent Warlock, you're not going to get hit all that hard, especially in World PvP, or just being casual and whatnot. You don't want them to be hitting you. So I would probably say don't take it. Kil'jaeden's Cunning. Cast and channel while moving. You take movement speed reduction up to 2 times, so you can be slowed by 30%. However, you can still be casting anything and everything while moving all the time. If you activate it, you can actually cast for 6 seconds without being snared. However, I do not recommend this because as soon as it goes on cooldown, you lose the effect. I've never had an instance where I need to stop casting because I'm slowed. Last but not least, Manaros Fury. Definitely one of the funnest things to do if you're out soloing and trying to farm mobs. Increases the area effect of your spells by 500%. Now, it's a bit misleading because it says 500%, but it doesn't increase Shadow Fury, for one. It does work on Rain of Fire, and it does work on the Infernal. However, it doesn't work when you augment with Fire and Brimstone on Conflag or stuff like that. So it should say that it just augments a couple of things as opposed to everything, but it is still really fun for soloing. We'll move on to some glyphs now. So for the major glyphs that I have, when out world PvPing, I have Conflagrate, so I can snare targets without immolation having to be up. Hellstone, 100% more healing from a Hellstone over time is far superior to just the initial 20%. Glyphs of Burning Embers. When you're out and about, you can build up Burning Embers incredibly easily, just by last hitting creatures that are just around you and using the Banes to do great effect. You always want this particular glyph. Looking at our minors, we have just a lot of fun stuff really. We have Carrion Swarm, no longer knocks back, typically for a PvE situation. Banish, different color. The most useful of all of them is Glyph of Nightmares. Your Fell Steed and Dread Steed can cross over water while running. Pretty useful for some RBGs, and if you have to get away from some people occasionally. Other than that, there's not much to it. You can arguably use a couple of other ones. Do not use Dark Soul, however. Dark Soul will give you 3% of your critical chance. However, when you actually use your Dark Souls, which is pretty much all the time, you are going to be missing out on the full effect. The only other ones that I can possibly think of are maybe Demonic Circle. Soul Consumption used to be amazing. I'm going to be testing it out again. It used to be when you shadow burn somebody and killed them, you would actually get 20% of your health back, and it was incredibly broken. Warlocks would never die, ever. However, now it's only Chaos Bolt, but in World PvP, I kill a lot of people with Chaos Bolt, and healing for 20% of my total health for free sounds like a pretty good deal. Other than that, there are no other competitors for your glyphs, and that's it. So the last thing that I'm going to cover are our stats, the reforges, hit cap, gemming, enchants, and professions. So we're going to start with our stats. Typically we want crit, mastery, and hit up until 6%. As you can see here, I'm at 5.98, so I have a 0.02% chance to miss level 90 targets. So other players. Obviously I'm not gemming for PvE, that's not what this is about. Now we're going to move on to reforge. Reforging, typically you want to take away haste. Take away haste, put it into mastery, or put it into crit. My personal preference, just from the way I play, I put it into critical strike. I like having my stuff give me back twice the amount of embers it normally would. It's just more health, it's more damage, it's everything you want. So, gem-wise, obviously the only meta gem we use, 260 Aeons, 3% increased critical strike effect. For those of you that don't know what the gem is, it is a burning primal diamond. Easy, almost every jewel crafter has it. Now, my gem of choice, and what I've gemmed in everything, simply because I world PvP, is PvP power. 320 of it, and you can either buy the perfects, or you can buy the actual crafted Stormy River's Heart. Stormy River's Hearts are usually cheaper, just because there's so many of them flooded on the market. At the time, I was making my leveling my jewel crafter, and I just had tons of leftovers. So, enchants. Bracers, 180 intellect. Main weapon, Jade Spirit. Offhand, 165 intellect. We want 200 PvP resilience for our chest. You can arguably have the 80 intellect or the 80 to all stats, however, the resilience is still pretty important. Our cloak, is going to have either crit or light weave embroidery if you're a tailor. Shoulders, you get the inscription, 200 intellect, 100 crit. There's no head enchants anymore, so we don't have to worry about that. Now gloves, 170 mastery. Nothing for belt. Pants, if you're a tailor, super easy. 285 int, 165 crit. You can do it yourself with just some thread. Otherwise, you have to buy it. Boots, you want 140 mastery, minor movement speed increase. Incredibly useful. Now, my professions, as you can see, are tailoring and enchanting. So tailoring, I put light weave embroidery on my cloak, I do my own pants, and it's just super easy for me. The light weave embroidery, when it actually procs, it's 2000 intelligence. In combination with the Jade Spirit, perfect. So we have 160 int on each ring, which is pretty much all that enchanting brings to the table, but it's nice to be able to enchant your gear, all of it by yourself. Of course, minus your shoulders. Now, arguably, engineering is going to be better instead of, I would say, enchanting for world PvP and PvE, just because the damage increase on the 1 minute cooldown on your gloves will be amazing. But this is just what I use because I like disenchanting old gear, making crystals out of it, etc. And that's pretty much all there is to being a warlock. There's not a whole lot of complexity there. If you want more specific numbers, you can leave a comment and I'll answer you.